In this week's video, join me for a trip back to the 1950s to discover a beautifully recreated 1950s high street. Welcome to Through Lucy's Lens, weekly videos where I go somewhere interesting and hopefully you will find it interesting too. I can't actually contain my excitement about this week's video. I've been here about an hour now and genuinely my mouth has been like this. Every single building that I've walked into, and I am at the Beamish Museum, somewhere that you have been asking me to go in the comments, hundreds of you, and I'm here and I'm kind of excited and emotional and it is blowing my mind. And this week's is about the new 1950s village here. It is amazing. I've cried twice, so let's go and have a look around together. Beamish Museum, located in County Durham, was the first open-air living museum in the United Kingdom, and it opened back in 1970. Beamish aims to capture the essence of life in North East England over the centuries. The 1950s village stood out to me as a must-see, giving an accurate representation of post-war Britain, a period marked by social, cultural and economic change. It's a period I love and I was so excited to see it. When I think about the 1950s, I like to imagine for a moment. After the hardships of World War II, the 1950s brought a sense of renewal and hope. The country was bustling with a newfound energy as families rebuilt their lives and communities began to thrive again. I was really excited to step back into this world. And what struck me immediately is that the village looks fresh, clean and new. And I really liked this because this is what it would have been like. This would have been the first impression for people at a time when they got to see these newly built housing estates or high streets. It would have looked so new and futuristic compared to the old Victorian and Edwardian slum housing, much of which was lost to bombing during the war or was being cleared to make way for a new way of living. The 1950s village is roughly set in the mid-1950s, so around 1956 or 1957. The first place I visited on the high street was Roma Parish Toy Shop. The Parish family owned a department store in Newcastle before Roma started this business in Middlesbrough. It was first a mobile lending library and then he expanded it to open his shop in 1949. Initially, the shop started as a newsagent and then it expanded into selling toys. My chin hit the floor as soon as I entered this shop. From the flooring, the bright flickering lighting, it just felt so authentic. The toy shop shows the development of new materials and toys in the 1950s. In particular, the introduction of plastic toys and a wider variety of toys available. As Britain moved out of post-war austerity, there was more available for more people. As well as the exhibits in the shop, you can also buy toys here too, which I thought made it wonderfully interactive. I was really interested to find out that the North East of England had the highest number of toy shops outside London and was also where manufacturers would take their new toys to test before official launches at toy fairs across the country. I love the floor. I really fell in love with the Dolls Hospital, where people could come along and bring their beloved dolls and toys to get fixed. A long way from the broken so I'll chuck it attitude of today. Added touches like the coat hanging up as a nod to the people of the town really touched me and continued to do so as I walked around the village. Upstairs, you'll find a record shop. It's really easy to miss, so make sure you wander up if you visit. This celebrates the emergence of youth culture and music trends like rock and roll, where music and buying music was available to more people. You can also browse the records, eye up the latest things to play them on. It's really interactive. That's one thing about Beamish actually. At no point did I feel it was a no-touch kind of place. There's also a selection of televisions. The 1950s was a decade of television in the United Kingdom. This was because they televised the Queen's coronation in 1953, and this was a driving force behind a massive increase in sales of television sets. TVs were still not available to all working class people, and of course were still a very expensive purchase, but they were available to more families through the availability of hire purchase and rental agreements. This brought televisions into the homes of more and more normal people. Next door is A. Reese Limited, radio and electrical services. This shop demonstrates the increase in domestic and electrical appliances in the 1950s and the changes in technology over that decade. The front room is the showroom where people could be dazzled with a new array of time-saving appliances, all again available to pay in instalments. I did wonder how many working class people actually had access to these things, as I know from my own experience my grandparent didn't get a lot of these things, particularly a fridge or a freezer, until well into the 1960s or 70s. But it was really fun and interesting to see the range of things that were available, and I always think they look so lovely. They're always very aesthetically pleasing to me. I also loved the range of advertising and promotional materials that feature stars of radio and TV of the day, as well as materials that have been provided by brands such as Pye and Ferguson. I'm pretty sure the telly I had when I was a kid was Pye. Out the back, there was a repair shop, and I fell in love with this space. I remember my dad taking me to a similar place to get our Hoover fixed, even in the 1980s, and the smell of WD-40 was absolutely spot on. One of the things I always love about visiting these living museums is how they spark a memory that you haven't thought about for years, and it just gives you a warm hug in that moment. This is John's Cafe and Confectionery. It's a reproduction of a cafe that was once owned by Giovanni Battista Parisella, and he was known locally as John. It was popular with young people in the 1950s and is a beautifully recreated piece of living history, highlighting the hard work of Italian immigrants who ran similar cafes up and down the United Kingdom. They created a welcoming space for the community to meet, warm up, and they were an integral part of village life. Having owned and run a similar space myself for many years, places like this were always my inspiration to provide not only hospitality, but joy and safety to the people in my community. I was really moved to have the chance to see this beautiful reproduction, particularly as I've recently had to hand back the keys to my community cafe. The economy. But hey, you can stop and sit down here, have a frothy coffee and take it all in. Next door is Middleton's Fried Fish Shop, set in 1952. This was so much like my nan's chip shop in Billesley, Birmingham, I actually couldn't get my breath. It was once owned by Doreen Middleton and she lived above the shop. Very much like my nan, a woman-owned business. The local chip shop is a place always hugely popular amongst the working classes, and my sausage and chips was absolutely gorgeous too. Next up is Elizabeth's, a ladies' hairdressers. It is a replica of an end terrace shop from Bow Street in Middlesbrough. This is one of the highlights of my trip, where you can book to have your hair done in one of 3 1950 styles for just £5. Zoe, that did my hair, was amazing. If you're watching this, thank you. I have very difficult hair and I felt like an absolute film star for the rest of the day. I remember members of my family visiting hairdressers like this every week for a perm and then a weekly set and brush out after that. I loved it. Now I am all dolled up, it was time to pop over the road for a visit to the pictures. This is the Grand Cinema, and honestly, I was not prepared for how amazing this building is. This cinema was originally in Ryhope, Sunderland, and was built in 1913. It's been recreated here from pieces salvaged from the original building. Cinemas like this were hugely popular in the 1950s, often selling out every performance with queues down the street for the next one. Not only was the cinema an affordable method of entertainment for the masses, but it also provided a public service by playing newsreels and advertisements in the days before mass TV ownership. The cinema also provided a place of safety for people, a warm place where people could watch a film when maybe their own home was cold and damp. The main auditorium includes a stage, screen, pit benches and the more expensive upholstered seats. The 2 beautiful stained glass windows were removed from the original cinema. The museum did extensive research to make sure the cinema was authentic as possible, so the paint colours and the atmosphere is all correct.
Town of Beamish basks in the sunshine, unaware of the horror that is about to unfurl. For unbeknownst to the innocent folk who dwell there,
What is most lovely about all these reproductions is that the people who originally used the cinema have been involved in the project. Bill Mather was a trainee projectionist at the cinema between 1950 and 1955. He said the Grand was a palace of dreams, and he used to visit from the age of 5 before becoming a trainee projectionist at just 10 years old. Bill still has his projectionist coat hanging up in the projection room, and the original projectors in here were donated from Durham University. I was absolutely blown away by this space. Cinema is so evocative for many people and is so important in the social history of the 20th century. It holds so many fond memories for people, and importantly, it was an affordable source of entertainment for the masses and is deeply bonded in the British sensibility. I thought the cinema was really deeply moving, and I don't think I've experienced a space like this for a long time. The cinema actually became a bingo hall in the 1960s, like so many other of its counterparts. Now I have an unexpected but delightful treat for you. Right in the middle of the 1950s high street is a "who lived in a house like this" moment. Can you believe it? I couldn't. This house is a recreation of number 33 Bishop's Close Street, which was in Spennymoor, County Durham. It's a typical miner's cottage, and it would have been owned by the local coal board after the nationalisation of coal mines in 1947. Norman Cornish lived here with his wife Sarah and their children Anne and John. It's a typical miner's terraced home. Norman himself worked at the nearby Dean and Chapter Colliery in Ferry Hill from the age of 14. Norman was also an artist as well as a hewer in the pits, and was part of the Spennymoor settlement of artists, writers and poets. The settlement provided free classes and community groups and was an outlet for creativity in an area affected by unemployment and poverty, where hard graft was prioritised before leisurely pursuits. Norman captured the everyday lives of the people of Spennymoor and the places he knew, and he continued to do this right up until his death at the age of 94 in August 2014. Norman made sure that his paintings, easels and some of his furniture was donated to the museum, and you can see not only his home but his art here in the house. The museum has created the house based on memories shared by Norman's family, and it feels lovely and homely, almost as if you have permission to just walk around a house still lived in. You know I love to look around real people's homes, so this was not just only a lovely surprise, but an absolute highlight for me. Again, nothing feels curated or off limits. You can simply stand and exist in the same space as an amazing person, yet only separated by time itself. I think it's important to note that because Norman was an artist as well as a hewer in the pits, he had the extra income from his art, so this house is a little bit more stylish than the norm. He was able to afford things like Scandinavian furniture and modern appliances that weren't available to everyone. Some things though, like the lino in the living room, the stone flags in the kitchen and the exposed timber boards in the bedrooms upstairs, will be familiar to the millions of people who've lived in similar homes across the United Kingdom. I didn't because it's a museum, but I really wanted to reach out and stroke the textured wallpaper, as it was exactly the same as the wallpaper in my granddad's house when I was a child. You know I love to hear from viewers in the comments, so let me know if this house has sparked any memories for you. The last place I want to show you in this video is the Colliery Welfare Hall and Community Centre. The building is a replica of Leasingthorne Colliery Welfare Hall that was built near Bishop Auckland in 1957. Halls like this were really important community hubs. And here they're showing how it offered maternity services and community health clinics funded by the then new National Health Service. These community centres were made out of prefabricated materials and could be built anywhere quickly to provide community hubs. Clinics like the one set up in the hall were attended by expectant mothers to receive antenatal care. Then once the baby was born, mothers would bring them to the clinic and make sure they were growing well, and would receive advice from the midwives, such as welfare advice. They'd also be able to get national dried milk, orange juice and cod liver oil. Yuck, cod liver oil. Blech. You will have seen a similar setup if you watch Call the Midwife. Halls like this would also hold community meetings, book clubs, play schools, and were a real hub of the community. I absolutely loved the 1950s style kitchen that includes replica workshops made in the Formica Group factory in North Shields. Formica, a type of laminate, was manufactured using a design from 1958 and is synonymous with kitchen furniture from the 1950s and beyond. I'm also a really big fan of historical public service information posters, and I was spoilt for choice in this hall. I haven't finished with the 1950s village just yet, as there'll be a video coming out soon about 3 1950s houses here at the museum. If you liked this one, you are going to love that, so please subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. I really don't know where to start about this 1950s high street. I just think it's pretty obvious. I thought it was wonderful. I spent all day here and I didn't even venture any further back in time. I didn't even look at the Victorian stuff, nothing. I was just here all day. It was so relaxed and I didn't feel watched or mithered, and the volunteers and staff that I did meet were the friendliest bunch. I really did enjoy a bit of northeastern hospitality. I really hope you enjoyed this little trip back to the 1950s with me this week. And as always, thank you for your support, and I look forward to spending more time with you in my next video. Until then, have a lovely day.